Welcome to the Actuaries in the Wild podcast. I started this podcast because I believe that actuaries are more than just your stereotypical number cruncher that sits at a computer all day. Many of us have endeavors that go beyond the traditional actuarial realm. My goal is to meet those actuaries who have ventured from their desks to explore their passions. It's time to meet the actuaries in the wild. Today's actuary in the wild is Dominic Lee. Dominic, tell the viewers a little bit about yourself.
Hi, Jeremy. Great to meet you and good to be here on the first episode. And congratulations on starting your podcast, your
Thank you.
first podcast. My name is Dominic Lee. So I'm an actuary. For those of you who aren't familiar with me, by day I work at SAS as a senior solutions advisor. So I'm in the software space for risk solutions for the insurance market in North America. I also, which we're going to talk about a lot. I
Right.
started a content community, Maverick Actuary, a year ago, and we are on all of the 12 major social platforms. My website came out about 3 weeks ago, and our overarching mission, is to maximize impact and value upon professionals on a global scale. Personally, in terms of me, I'm from Jamaica, but I've been living in the States for probably a couple of decades now. So I
Yeah.
came here towards the end of high school, went to boarding school, went to grad school here. Went to undergrad briefly as well. Actuarial science major, then went into the insurance world. Uh, what's interesting with when you think of introducing yourself, you talk
Mhm.
about what do I do outside the office. One of the things I tell people is that when you're in the content community and you do that very seriously, it kind of becomes a way of life. I
Yeah.
almost think of it as gaming. Well, not exactly the same, but you know how you have people who are gamers. So whether they are playing Halo or Call of Duty, and it's kind of like a lifestyle. So it's just something that I've integrated into my life. I make a lot of content across different platforms, and I enjoy it. It's not a chore for me. I do have very concrete goals that I'm trying to accomplish with Maverick Actuary. Uh, but in addition to the content stuff, which is really more of a recent thing in the past few years, really enjoy sports. I grew up as a competitive swimmer in Jamaica. Went to every competition apart from the Olympics, so
Yeah.
got great, had a great career. Very fortunate there. My favorite sports is soccer or football, as we call it in Jamaica. Um, and yeah, so I don't keep up as much as I should with European football, but I do watch the Champions League final every year at a minimum, and I try to get in some of the knockout games. I do also enjoy playing football sometimes. I haven't played in a while since the pandemic came. I mean, they really haven't. Well, I shouldn't say there haven't been any leagues, but I guess
Right.
I kind of haven't done a good job of staying in shape. So I'm working on that. But in general, I like a good pickup game here and there. So that's a little bit about me. Hope that helps to give you some
And
extra.
we'll get into a little bit more about you. And one of the things I kind of thought about when you say you introduce yourself, a lot of actuaries and maybe a lot of people in the business world, when they ask you to introduce yourself, a lot of it that you really talk about is they introduce yourself as here's my job, here's what I do
So
in a day to day. And they don't really talk about, okay, here's what I do outside my
yeah,
job. And then part of what I want to do with Actuaries in the Wild is talk about
yeah,
what you want to do outside your job. But first, I actually do want to go back into just a little bit more information about your background in your actuarial career. Why did you decide you wanted to become an actuary?
great question. I've had some good practice with this one because I feel like I get asked this all the time. But
Yeah.
essentially, three reasons. And I will say that the order is very suspicious. I
Yeah.
will admit, had I gone back in time, the order would have been reversed. But if I had to talk about it, like three main reasons from most important to least important at the time. The first was money. I think,
Yeah.
I was thinking I was going to be rich. This profession makes a lot of people make a lot of money in this profession. So being young, of course, wanting to go out on my own and be independent. Money was like the first draw to the profession. Then the second one was the competitive nature of the exam structure and how you
Right. Yeah.
get into the profession. Being a competitive swimmer, for me, it felt like a natural transition. I was looking for something, given that I had recently retired from competitive swimming, I was looking for something to motivate me and to channel that competitive energy elsewhere. So that was number two. And then number three, which perhaps should have been number one, was wanting to find a way to apply my mathematical skills in more of a business context, and I was very attracted to the multidisciplinary nature of it. So I think that is perhaps the most constructive
Yeah,
reason,
yeah.
and that's number one, but it was number three.
Yeah, I know a lot of beginning actuaries. The exams is a big part of why you get into the field, and a lot of them see that as all I have to do is pass exams, to get ahead, and so it's really a level playing field for a lot of them. Of course, the exams are not easy, as you know. We both have been through the exams, so it's not something where you just go take an exam and pass and it's easy, because it's a lot of work to get through that. Um,
Mm.
you talked about that you work at SAS, and your title is Senior Actuary and Senior Solutions Advisor, Risk Research and Quantitative Solutions. So that's quite a long title. Can you give a brief summary of what you do at SAS?
Yeah, it just sounds very long. The risk research and quantitative part, that's probably why it sounds so long. But
Yeah,
essentially, I work on the pre-sales team for North America. So I'll take a step back. When you think of SaaS, a lot of actuaries, you might think of something like Enterprise Guide, using SaaS as a tool to do basic data wrangling.
right.
Maybe you're pulling data from a structured data source like Teradata. What a lot of actuaries may not know is that SaaS is more than just like a programming language. It's through Via. Via is the most modern, most recent platform. That's our platform. It's an end-to-end platform, and we do have what we call like very dedicated business content on that. So we
Hmm.
have solutions that are specified towards what we call use cases. So for instance, if you think of pricing and reserving, to an actuary that's a function, but from a
Right.
software perspective that's a use case. So we have recently came out with a solution called dynamic actuarial modeling as an example, that has pricing capabilities for property and casualty. It has AI machine learning capabilities and several other features. So we do have within the team I work on, we are selling marketing risk solutions and positioning them for the North American insurance market. So it's interesting because I'm on the opposite end of the table now. My clients are now insurance companies where I used to
Okay.
work for an insurance company. We're seeking to sell software to insurance companies. So on my team, our overarching goal is to maximize software revenue for the sales organization. But I'm on the front end of the transaction. I'm helping to educate the customers. I'm doing product demos, but also internally, the third thing is I'm helping to educate SaaS on insurance in terms of what trends are happening in the market and how you can position the solutions for specific use cases. What use cases make sense? What use cases don't make sense?
I
So
see.
that is a very brief summary of my role. It's really interesting. A couple more things I'll add. Very different, of course, not just being in the pre-sales organization, but I get exposure to other things that actuaries would probably never see in
Right.
their job, like business development. I have a good network, and I'm able to leverage that to bring, to at least identify prospects and to communicate with them and work with them and hopefully sell something to them. Also get to work on things like email marketing campaigns, social media marketing campaigns. We did a video campaign last year, which was pretty successful. So yeah, it's really interesting. I sometimes I do miss some of the, because I'm not an insurance company, we don't always have a ton of like transactional data. So I do miss that part sometimes, but it's a different skill set. I'm very close to the technology side. I get to understand the technology stacks and how those are configured, which is a different part of your brain, and I think it does give me a different view on things, which I do appreciate.
Right. So I would assume this job is really helps you with a lot of the skills that you're trying to really impart on people with a Maverick Actuary, which you mentioned that you started last year. Tell us a little bit about what the Maverick Actuary is and what your motivation was for starting it.
Okay, so in terms of what it is, I'll just give the one word answer, then I'll work
Yeah,
backwards.
sure.
It's a multi-platform content community across all the major social platforms, and like I said, we just had our website. But taking a step back in terms of where this idea came from, I started out my career in property and casualty insurance, worked at a large carrier for almost 10 years,
Hmm.
went through their rotational program. Very classical or traditional way to start your career in insurance as an actuary. The leadership program was focused on developing three things: business acumen, so helping you to understand what the insurance business
Right.
is, see different areas; analytical expertise, helping you to get the technical skills you need; be able to do some of the core things actuaries need to do, like pricing, reserving, and then leadership expertise, giving opportunities to manage, delegate, work on lead committees and things of that nature. So did that for 10 years and got exposure to personal lines, commercial lines, and specialty.
Right.
Then did a couple of shorter moves within insurance and got to the point where I realized that this a combination of personal circumstances, but just me also realizing that was not the primary insurance environment wasn't very compatible with my personality.
Hmm.
Uh, so when I was in between jobs, I had a lot of time to reflect, and it just happened to be during the pandemic, in the midst of right in the middle of 2020, and I had a lot of time to be observant, see what was happening on television. And the one thing that stood out to me was that there were no actuaries on television or in the
Right.
media helping to, you know, unpack and explain and disentangle what was happening from a risk management perspective. And while the crisis was largely health, health crisis, or the public health crisis, the risk management aspect I felt was very heavily undermined. And I didn't personally, I didn't think that the people who were tasked with solving it were qualified to do so for the most part, whether it was a coronavirus task force,
Hmm.
like I said, the people who were discussing this thing in the media, and the people who were working, in the government, essentially, all the people who were making the executive. If you think of like at a state and local level, the governors, and like I said, I don't know for sure exactly who was advising them, but for all I know, I don't know. I definitely didn't get the impression that
Yeah.
actuaries played a really large role. At least, and by the way, I've since learned that that this was slightly different in other geographies. So at the time, my observations were specific to North America. I've
Right.
since been educated that in the UK there was a lot of activity going on. There's a COVID actuary response group. I've been fortunate to network with some of them, with interview one of their members on my podcast. So it's great to see that there was some activity in other parts of the world. Still not as much as I would want to see. So having made that observation, I kind of got frustrated, and I was thinking, well, what can I do? I mean, I'm just one person. What can I do to help raise awareness of this issue? And I was speaking at a conference coming up, and I decided to do a TED style talk. I was in between jobs. I had some time to work on this, and I just happened to be watching TED talks.
Right.
I always kind of like them. I like Malcolm Gladwell, what's his name, Dan Pink, and some of these guys. And I just kind of started binge watching them, and I realized that, wow, like these are very effective. They're 20 minutes long, or well, I think it's between 6 to 20 minutes. Some of them are on the shorter
Right.
side, but no more than 20 minutes, and they're extremely effective. And I thought of some of the challenges within which we'll eventually get to, I guess, within the profession in terms of our effectiveness or lack thereof at presenting. So I thought I had an opportunity to do two things. One is to show how do you present effectively, and two is to directly address uh, the actuarial value proposition itself, and where we are today, what we are capable of, and what some of those gaps are between where we are today and where we can be in the future. So the TED style talk happened in June, and then it got like lots of attention. I
Right.
put it very heavily on LinkedIn, and based on the traction it got, I decided that I wanted to take things a step further. I had been on LinkedIn for probably since 2013, and this was what, 2020. So I'd been on LinkedIn for a long time. Wasn't posting as much in the first few years, maybe not as much until like 2016, 17ish. But I decided to start expanding across other platforms. So I
Right.
started. I mean, I was on Instagram for years, a personal Instagram, but
Right.
started doing Instagram as a business Instagram, then went to TikTok, Twitter, and before you know it, probably by February, I was on all the 12. I'm not producing actively on every single platform, but I do have a presence on all of the 12 major social platforms. I won't go through the list, but
Yeah.
you can Google them to figure out which ones they are. And my website does show, the bottom of my website does have links to all of them. So yeah, that's where that was the origin of Maverick Actuary, and then things have been happening over time. Like honestly, I had no idea where this was going to be at the end of 2021. I had some good opportunities in 2021 with the TED Style Talk, and then I had the opportunity to speak at the CAS meeting. Did a session on my own, which I'm very proud of, and that was a very tough undertaking because usually three people do the sessions, and
Hmm.
usually, to be fair, like, I mean, no offense to anyone, but typically the sessions are more just recycled sessions from something that someone presented at work, and they're just kind of rejiggering the slides.
Right.
But what I did was from scratch. We did a topic that's never been done before: social media analytics. It's a very fairly new topic, of course, because social media is still in its infancy. And so I was very proud of. I did all the time last year. Spent that on speaking and develop and taking those skills to the next level. Of course, I've been presenting within corporate for several years, but this was no more like with both of those talks, both of them having a professional team, having professional graphic designers, professional producers for the textile talk for sure, and then for the CAS meeting again, professional graphic designers, professional storyboarders, and stuff like that. So it
Right.
certainly took it to the next level. Wasn't sure what's going to happen in 2022, but in this year, no, it was more about content on the platforms, me producing like short form content, video, and things of that nature. And the podcast Live with the Maverick, I started that. That started out, it was almost accidental. I
Right.
was doing lives on Instagram. You have the capability to go live and, of course, and talk to your followers. And I wanted to just make it more interesting. So I decided to put together a short list of people I thought might be interesting.
Right.
Didn't think they would all say yes. One or two of them did say no, but a few of them said yes, and we got a couple of them booked. And before you know it, today we had. So we started in, I think we started in May. Now we're in October, and today was episode 22, and I'm booked for the next 10 episodes. So it's
Yeah.
podcast has really taken off. It's not just on Instagram now; it's on several audio platforms, and it's I'm very excited about the guests that we have. I don't announce the guests in advance, so we'll see within the next few weeks. But I booked one that I thought was going to be really exciting today, and the next
Yeah.
few ones are going to be very good.
Well, that's good.
So
Yeah, and I think I haven't announced my guests on this, but I have one of my next guest is one that you had on yours too, which I think
oh,
people
great.
will be interested in. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, so,
Just to follow up, if you don't mind, just real
oh
quick,
yeah, go ahead.
I left out one important thing. So we are a content community, but in terms of the overarching objective, so
Hmm.
this is tied now directly to my initial observations from the textile talk. The overarching objective is to maximize the impact and value of quant professionals on a global scale. So impact and value, we'll talk about that a little bit later. But quant professionals, it started with actuaries. So
Yeah.
Maverick Actuary, we started with only actuaries, and then I realized that there is a there's this. It's not identical across every single profession itself. I think that numbers people tend to have some of the same challenges. They oftentimes tend to get overshadowed. People expect them to
Right.
sit behind the screen, and in my opinion, their impact is largely diminished as a result. So it's to help quant professionals, people who are numbers people across several domains. The main three that we focus on are actuaries, risk managers, and then I guess analytics / data science. Those are the three I'm focused on right now. But anyone, my definition, my personal definition of quant profession is like anyone who spends like 50% or more of their time in behind a spreadsheet or in a script
I see.
editor. That's
Right.
my definition of it. People may have a
Right.
different opinion, but those are the people I'm focused on helping with my brand.
So you mentioned as part of this that the actuaries didn't really have an influence uh, when you saw some of these major things on TV. I'll actually say I noticed when this whole pandemic came on you never heard actuaries too. I noticed the same thing. I
Yeah,
actually tried to even send a note to President Trump's Twitter, which was probably useless, but
yeah,
say,
yeah,
you need an actuary involved in this. Of course, I never saw
yeah,
an actuary involved in anything that they were doing
yeah.
with coronavirus
Sure.
at the time, and it was probably evident that you didn't see it. But why don't you think actuaries or other quant professionals had any influence when it came to significant risk management issues? Was it the actuaries just not getting involved, or was it others just not seeing value in the actuaries, or a combination?
A combination, and that the question is a really convenient one because that's essentially where the brand was born. If you look at my website, I have I talk about the story of the brand, and it came from three specific things. The first one was a lack of not having a lack of name ID or name
Hmm.
recognition.
Right.
So people just don't know. We don't have name ID. Most people just don't know what an actuary is.
Right.
The second thing is lack of or not having, in my opinion, an easily explainable value proposition. I think anyone who has been and my example is specific to actuary, so
Right.
that's probably an easier way for me to explain it because that's how it started for me, and then I expanded. But the second one, like I said, is lack of an explainable value proposition. We've all gotten the question, what is an actuary? We all have a
Hmm.
different definition, and the
Right.
definition varies in length. But the average person, it's very hard for them to understand and conceptualize what it is if they've never worked with actuaries before. So I think when people try to explain what it is, like the average person tunes out. And the average person also never really interfaces with an actuary. Like, of course, the average person has, or everyone essentially has at least an auto insurance policy if you own a car.
Right.
But you're working with an agent. You're not ever interacting. I'm glad you asked this because I didn't think of it this way. But yeah, the average person is not going to have any transactions with an actuary. So they're
Right.
not going to
Yeah.
have any interactions. And then the third thing is lack of a strategic mindset. Um, and for me, it's more when I think of actuaries and how we've been trained. It's been, I guess, originally when the profession came about, the focus was more on insurance,
Hmm.
less so about risk broadly speaking. So I think we've been trained to think that insurance is the only place that we can play. And this is very subjective, by the way. This observation for me, I'm not saying it as a matter of fact. Based on my time in the profession, I found the the membership to be a little bit I don't know if I would use the word mercurial, but sorry, not mercurial, very territorial.
Hmm. Yes.
It's very avant-garde. It's okay, well, we are this apart. It kind of has like a country club vibe about it. It's, we are a small profession and a small group of highly elite individuals and highly qualified, which we are qualified. But the intention is never really to grow. It's more to kind of, and no one will say this publicly. It's just my instinct is, I think uh, the membership tends to prefer the numbers to be smaller than larger because I think it doesn't give them a heightened sense of importance. So for me, that's not being very strategic because it's thinking of things and having more of a finite mindset. Well, these are the boundaries of where we can operate in. So those three things: the lack of name
Yeah.
ID, the lack of explainable proposition value prop, and then the lack of a strategic mindset. And then that's where within Maverick Actuary, the media story strategy came about, which we'll talk about a little bit later. So those are the main reasons I've observed on my end in terms of why I think we didn't have that impact.
So you mentioned when I was looking at your website, you mentioned something called the Maverick mentality. What do you mean by the Maverick mentality?
Yeah, I'm glad I looked at this before because I almost forgot, but it's kind of embedded in my psyche, to be honest. I think of it as like three things. Like the maverick mentality. I think of being a maverick is someone who's bold. So you're willing to take risk. You're willing to be really daring. You're not willing. You're not necessarily just satisfied with the status quo. You're bold and you're willing to take risks. That's the first thing.
Hmm.
The second thing is unconventional, understanding that there's room to dream and to dare in the world of insurance risk and analytics. So having very daring visions of how you can utilize your skill set. And then the third thing in terms of the maverick mentality is being influential. Is not just having skills, but having your skills translate to value and being able to have someone listen to you when you're in a room or like in an environment like within the corona the pandemic, being able to have a seat at the table essentially. So
Right.
being a person of influence. So those are the three things like I think of when I think of the maverick mentality. Those are the things I aspire towards.
So you mentioned one of the things you mentioned on here is willing to take risk, and I'll say a lot of actuaries are not willing to take risk. We tend to be risk adverse. I don't know if how many people who are watching this are Christians, but I am, and one of the things I do when I pray, usually every day, one of my prayers I pray is I say, God, grant me the courage to be willing to risk something new, and so
Yes.
I say that because we tend to be risk adverse, but I think we need courage to risk, and because it's not something you have to kind of go outside of your comfort zone. And I think for a lot of us, we have to go outside of our comfort zone to be risk, to take that risk. Why do you think a lot of actuaries don't want to take that risk?
Good question. I think, and I think I remember the tweet you're referring to. I know I made a tweet about this earlier this year. I think the main reason for me is when you think of how we've been classically trained, it would come through the exam system. I, I don't think this is unique to actuaries. I think this is a symptom of the broader scholastic school
Yeah.
system. If you think of it, the people who get all the answers right are rewarded, and then the people who get the most answers wrong or told that they're not smart and
Hmm.
they don't get into these schools or deprived of all the opportunities in the classical system, the classical educational system. So I think the level of risk aversion that you're seeing in the profession is largely speaking the fear and the trepidation that I think actuaries have of being wrong and not being able to operate in a more nimble and agile and dynamic environment as you need to when it comes to something like a pandemic response. We're very tightly wound up to get all the answers solved within a few minutes, and that's not how the real world works. So I think some of it is the nature of the qualification process and how we've been kind of trained. I mean, I don't want to say trained, but you know what I mean. Conditioned is probably a
Right.
better word.
Yeah. So, listening to your podcast post, it was actually an inspiration for me starting mine.
Mhm.
And so I already mentioned I had an audio podcast, but
Mhm.
you know, this is my first video podcast, and it's one I wanted to start. But I'm sure there's some viewers who don't know how to start. What are your suggestions for actuaries who want to start podcasts, expand a social media footprint, do something within social media?
I think the first thing that you want to do is be intentional. So ask yourself, why do you want to do it?
Hmm.
That's the first thing, and then you want to ask yourself, well, what is my personality, and what's my personality like? Like, what do I prefer to do? Do I prefer to write? Do I prefer to make videos? If I'm doing videos, what kind of videos? What kind of content do I want to talk
Hmm.
about? And I say that because, like, when you look at, know that I'm on all the platforms, I know who all the players
Right.
are. The space is still very green. There's really not that
Yeah.
many, relatively speaking, not many creators, or at least none that have, really had much of had like large impact, I would say, in the space. But if you look at the platforms, like if you look at, LinkedIn, of course, I'm one of the players there for sure. YouTube, you have other players.
Hmm.
And the content is very different. Like I'm talking about like strategic thought leadership through the lens of Maverick Actuary. I'm talking about corporate experiences and a lot of those things in short form text for the most part. But the people on YouTube, they're talking, a lot of the creators on YouTube are talking about, oh, a day in the life of my job. This is
Yeah.
what it's like being a pricing actuary. This is what an actuary makes. So the content is very different. And I think it does suit different platforms, suit different personalities. TikTok, of course, is very different. It's
Right.
very, very short. You have to be able to make content for like 7 to 10 seconds. So
Yeah.
and it's first person video. So like I know people who
Hmm.
like making content on TikTok. Personally, I really don't as much. I've done some TikToks and they've done very well, but it's
Yeah.
not my first passion. It's just like, I'm there because it's table stakes if you want to be in the creator games.
Hmm.
Like I'm on the platform and every so often I'll do something, but it's not my number one. So I'd say
Yeah.
the things I mentioned there is be intentional. Like, what are you trying to accomplish? That will inform who your target audience is. I mean, if you're trying to reach people who are in their 40s and 50s, 60s, then it's probably LinkedIn. If you're
Yeah.
trying to reach people who are in high school, it's probably TikTok. So be very intentional about what you're trying to accomplish. That'll inform your audience, and then be honest about who you are as a person and
Hmm.
what's going to be most comfortable to you. Like I said, I know creators, I don't want to say personally, but people who I know who are active on some platforms, but I
Right.
personally don't think that they would ever agree to do an interview because it's just not their personality, right? They're more introverted and they just don't want to do it. So, you know, it comes down to what you're looking for and who you are as a person. Those are a couple of things I've mentioned, recommend, think of.
Okay. Um, so you're the second most followed actuary on LinkedIn, so I know most of the people know how to find you. But for those who don't, tell our viewers and listeners how to follow you.
I would Well, maverickactuary.com. That might be the easiest thing because when you go to maverickactuary.com, that's my website. On the footer of all of the pages, you'll see all of my 12 social media handles. If I had to prioritize in terms of where I have a presence, I would say LinkedIn is certainly the most important. That's the one, or LinkedIn and Instagram. But in terms of like my presence and current impact, LinkedIn for sure. Post on that essentially every day, multiple times a day usually. Uh, Oh, and also my website will within the FAQ section on my website or the FAQ page on my website, it will describe very specifically the kind of content I produce on each platform. So it will tell you what to look for on
Hmm.
LinkedIn, who the target audience is, the kind of posts you can expect versus Instagram versus the I think right now I'm doing it on six, actively producing on six
Right.
total platforms. Uh, and then Instagram, like I said, Instagram is the next most important one. The target audience there is more the early career. If you're in the first like 10 years of your career, or even if you're a student, it's a little bit lighter than, well, we have the Live with the Maverick, which is of course very serious content. It's a podcast.
Right.
But other than that, we have some lighter stuff like memes, reels, things that you can just look at very quickly. And of course, when people are on Instagram, they're in a different state of mind. They're more in entertainment mode. So I do keep that in mind as I create the content. And it's an interesting challenge, but yeah, that's the second most important one. Then Twitter, still, I've done some interesting tweets this year. I haven't used it as much as I could because I've just been so
Yeah.
busy with other platforms, but Twitter is the next important, and then TikTok. So I'd say that those four. I have also started doing poetry on Tumblr. So I've done two poems
Okay.
so far, actuarial poems, and those are fun. Just something different. I wrote poetry when I was younger, and it's just now something because I have that skill. I'm utilizing that for to help spread the message on actuarial. So
I see.
I think I mentioned five there. I think I left out. I forget what number six was, but you'll see it on my platform. You see it on my website. You'll see the handles at the bottom of the pages, and the FAQ will tell you what you can expect on each of those platforms.
Well, Dominic, I appreciate you for being my first guest on Actuaries of the Wild today. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and congratulations on starting this. And when you said that you were inspired by my podcast, like those are the kind of things that show me that we are making a difference, and that's exactly what one of the things I'm trying to accomplish is
Yeah.
help to get actuaries to push outside, not for the sake of just coming outside your comfort zone,
Right.
but to lean into things that you're passionate about, and to add value in spaces that are outside of the parameters of your day job and the things
Right.
that are strictly defined for you, because I think we can add value in many other places. So I'm very excited and happy to hear that you've gotten this off the ground, and I think it'll be a very fun experience for you.
Well, thank you.
So,
Appreciate that. And if you're an actuary, an actuary who's ventured out into the wild, contact me. We can share your story. You can find Actuaries in the Wild on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. Maybe some of those other platforms later too, like Dominic mentioned. But thank you for joining us on our first episode, and see you next time on Actuaries in the Wild.